So basically, I would like to cover 4 topics. One is the land degradation. Second is the forest landscape restoration. Third, nature-based restoration or NBS. And the last one is a few example. Do you hear me, Jen?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. And then go ahead. So as I discussed previously, so if you see this graph about the forest change in the last decade in the Asia Pacific. So about half of the countries gain more forest cover, and a few countries, the forest cover are more stable. But most of the Southeast Asia country, except Vietnam, we lost certain of forest cover, particularly in Cambodia and in Myanmar. So what is the meaning of land degradation? So land degradation, according to the FAO and UNCCD convention, it is defined as the reduction or loss of biological, economic productivity of crop and complexity of landfill, cropland, irrigated cropland, range forest, and woodland, resulting from a combination of several drivers, including the land use change, the poor management practice. But in summary, so I would summarize that the land degradation mean the declining in the quality, health, and productivity of land, either in agricultural land or the forest land, and have the consequence on soil, water, biodiversity. And finally, if you have the impact on the quality of life of the human and the nature benefit to the people that we already discussed in the EP framework. I forgot to tell you, I already shared my PowerPoint to Professor Yutanapong. And hopefully Professor Yutanapong already shared with you, okay? The second one is the desertification or deserts. So previously we may imply or got the perception that a desert only happen in Africa or in some area in India, in northern India. But according to the FAO and UNCCD, so desertification is defined as the land degradation in arid, semi-arid, and dry, humid area, resulting from the various factors such as the climate variation or the extreme drought, human activities, and also the represent of the reduction in the loss of biology, economic productivity of crops in Thailand. So this one is quite similar to land degradation. So if we see the process of the land degradation and desertification, so if we have more frequent or more severe land degradation, it will lead to desertification in finally, and we lost a lot of fertile land for agriculture, and those productivity land will become the deserts or the abundant land. So you can see the map and the picture on the right hand side. So the bottom it shows the real deserts that we have their perception. And the above picture or the map that show the dry land weight on aridity index, or the area that have the less moisture and more drought extreme. So you can see that in Asia, we have it part of the China, in Mongolia, in India, and particularly in the Middle East, and in Africa, so the sub-Sahara region and South Africa, and in Latin America, so along the west coast of Latin America, so in US and Canada, also in the west coast of the North America. So the east coast in this one, so we have more rain, more productivity. So at the international level, so it's quite similar to biodiversity and the climate change. They have the what called intergovernmental forum and the convention that is directly responsible to combat desertification. So this one is called the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, or UNCCT. So it was established in 1994, and it took 2 years become the convention was enforced when we have enough the membership, and the aim of the convention is to combat desertification, land degradation, and mitigate the effect of the drought. So since the establishment in 1994, so you can see the rapid, the rapid participation or the adoption of the UNCCD. So right now there are about 106 countries that engage or involve or rectify UNCCD. So most of the country in Southeast Asia, except the Malaysia, Indonesia already endorsed. This show the blue one. Okay. So in Thailand, we have the Land Development Department under the Ministry of Agriculture and Cooperative. Is the national focal point that coordinates and responsible and engage with the UNCCD. So if you see this picture, it shows the consequence or the evolution of land degradation. So we started with the wilderness area, when we have limited use or utilization of the natural resources, either for the crop and for construction. So this one is called undegraded state. So there are lots of biodiversity, and the land is healthy and can provide a lot of food and ecosystem services to nature and to the people. So we started with the extensive land use, something like the subsistence economy, subsistence agriculture, very limited use for food production. But however, other functions of the land can provide, such as the biodiversity, the climate regulation, water retention, and fiber. But since we have more human population, so the land is more intensively used for agriculture, for food production. So the other benefit or other function that land provide to the human substantially decrease, and after it's limited or decline, and become the poor health and degradation. So those land become abundant or look like the deserts or unused land. So it means that this degraded utilization and heavy use. So this one is the useless and become the problem in many countries, particularly in the desert area. So according to the UNCCD, and UNCCD gather information from all member countries, and they report the status, and extent of the driver or the pressure that caused the land degradation by region. So they have Africa, America, Asia, Europe, and Oceania. So the drivers or the factor includes the direct driver includes grazing, cropland and agriculture, native forest and plantation. So this one something like the logging. So this is non-timber forest product extraction and industry and uh, industry and energy development, forest fire, infrastructure development, and invasive species, and the size of the arrow showing the contribution of each factor in the region, and the red and the color from yellow to dark red showing the degradation of biodiversity and ecosystem services. So for the red one, it means that the services from agriculture and biodiversity are totally lost. So if we see the example in Asia, particularly in Southeast Asia, so grazing, we still have the grazing, but not the intensive. But agriculture production is the main driver or the main factor, including the logging, concession, energy development, and forest fire, and the industrial development and invasive species. And the trend of this sector are increasing in the future, particularly the invasive species, crop production, and the extraction of the forest and plantation due to we have the high population and many people are still living under below the poverty. So if we compare to the Western European country, which are more developed than the Eastern country. So the problem of the crop production, harvesting, and the non-timber forest product and extraction from industry are either stable or decreasing. But the problem for the invasive species happen to all regions and the trend are increasing. Okay. And UNCCD, they also have the regular meeting for a conference of the party or the party member, and they gather on information and consolidate the report. So the map is showing the proportion of the degraded land on the total agriculture. So the red one is show that the very high percentage of land degradation, and the gray one show no available data. It means that the country did not report, either did not report or not the member of the CCD. For example, in US, in fact, they have a lot of rich information, but US is not a member, so they do not report it. So the green one show the less degradation or the low percentage. So this one include, if you see the map, this one is the Finland. So Finland is quite rich country. So they have a lot of the forest plantation, forest cover, I think more than 90% and very limited agriculture use, same as the I think this one might be in the Eastern European. Okay. So according to the report, so the key driver or the key pressure to the land degradation includes the overgrazing, poor soil management, deforestation, urbanization. It means a lot of infrastructure development and excessive irrigation and climate change. So the huge problem, about nearly 40% of the world's in totals of agricultural land divided the dedicated land for agriculture, and many people, about almost 2 billion or 21% of the global population have the failing the crop yields or face the impact of the land degradation for the crop production and have the consequence on the food security, particularly in Africa, Sudan, Sub-Sahara, that you already see the news from either from newspaper or from TV. So this two bottom photo show the severe problem of land degradation in Sub-Sahara and in India. So Sub-Sahara African country or in this region, so they have the huge problem with the land degradation and food production. And in India, particularly in western side, it is very dry. Okay. So there are a lot of techniques to define land degradation. So the previous map, this is showing only the what you call the proportion of land degradation over agricultural land, and this one showing the land degradation index based on 6 indicator of biophysical and socio-economic, including the biomass. It means a lot of biomass, either trees or the grass, have been used, biodiversity, soil health, water resources or the moisture content, economic and social, cultural condition. So you see some. So the gray one show no data or no reported. If data is available, so this one become the red one, similar to India, and a lot of area in Mongolia, in Myanmar, and in China also classified as the high land degradation according to the GLADIS index. But other country in European country, they don't have the problem. Okay. So how about in Thailand? So in Thailand, the Land Development Department is the national focal point, and they also have the main responsibility for the land, agricultural land management and land improvement. So Land Development Department in Thailand classify land degradation into 5 categories. One including saline soil along either along the coastline or in the plateau that you have the what called the evaporation of the soil rock underneath the soil, particularly in northeast Thailand. Extreme acidic soil, very high acid. For example, in southern Thailand, when we convert the peatland to agriculture, then the shallow sites that contain the sulfur will oxidize with the air after removal of the peat, or the area to the east of Bangkok in Nakhon Nayok. In the paddy land, we also have a lot of the acid soil where the pH below 7. Extreme acid soil happen in southern Thailand in the degraded peat swamp, and in the Nakhon Nayok the acid pH about 5 to 6. That is we consider as the medium or mild. Sulfate particularly in southern Thailand, and sandy soil is the poor soil, so it cannot hold the water content on year round. So we have a big problem in the northeast of Thailand, where the sandy rocks is the main parent material, and most of the soil is classified as the either sandy loam or loamy sand that have the very high evaporation, and mountainous soil or mountainous area that used to be covered by forest cover, but it have converted to agriculture, so the productivity is very low. So the picture on the right hand side showing the main threat or the main drivers. So the red one is the topsoil erosion. So most of ASEAN, African, North America, and Latin America, Africa have the problem. And the dark or the black or the dark gray or the black is the contamination of the chemicals. So the second main threat, so the orange showing the removal of organic carbon. It means that the forest conversion or converted land to other area. So the blue one is the salinity and solidification, and the red one erosion, and the third this one some less problem. Okay, so I used to conduct the research for Asian Development Bank about 15 years ago to define the land degradation in Thailand. So according to the definition of the LDD, so one is called the farmland vulnerable to soil erosion. So for the soil erosion, so usually we use the universal soil loss equation to calculate the amount of the topsoil erosion. So the soil loss is depend on several factors. One is the rainfall intensity and runoff. So if we have more rainfall, more intensity, so the erosion will be high. Soil erodibility, this one according to the soil texture. For example, the loamy soil have more erosion than the clay soil. And this one is the slope length, including the slope, the steep. L is the range of the slope. If we have the high slope and the length is very long, so it has a lot of the momentum or the key factor. So C is the crop management. C is the management factor. It means that if the area is still covered by dense forest, for example, evergreen forest, so the drain drop to the surface soil is quite limited. But if we have the open area like the grassland or the rubber or eucalyptus plantation. So there are a lot of chance that we have the gap, so the land can directly contact to the surface soil. And P is the conservation practice. So if we have the conservation practice like the terrace or the crowd cover, so the erosion ability is quite low. So based on the this equation, so we can calculate and classify the erosion causes into 4 causes. One is very low erosion. This one is less than 5 tons per hectare per year. And this one is the low 5 to 10 and 10 to 20 tons and more than 20 tons per hectare per year is very high. So according to the LDD definition, so LDD defines that any agricultural land that exists in moderate to high topsoil erosion, it means that the soil erosion amount is greater than 10 tons per hectare per year. So those agricultures will be classified as the vulnerable farmland. So it means a lot agriculture face a lot of topsoil erosion. So at the national level, so we have about 34% of agricultural land that are defined as the vulnerable land for soil erosion, particularly in the north and in the northeast of Thailand, where the east and the central, the percentage is quite low compared to the north when we have the mountainous area, and in the northeast because most of the area are covered by the what's called the sandy loam or loamy soil. So the soil texture have high soil erodibility. And the second one is marginal land. So the marginal land is mean the agricultural land that have low productivity or not suitable for agriculture. So in Thailand right now we have agriculture area about nearly 50% of agriculture, but only half, only 23% of the country are irrigated. It means we have the irrigation system. So the last one we have the landfed system. So cultivation maybe one crop per year according to the rainfall calendar. And in Thailand we have almost 50% of the workforce engaged in agriculture, but the economic or the GDP contribution about 8 to 9% is. So we use a lot of land, a lot of human resources, but economic return is very low compared to the industry and services such as tourism. So tourism we invest less money, but the return to the average or the mean of production. So that's why we use a lot of workforce and the economic return are quite low compared to the agriculture area in Japan or in the European country. What the rehabilitation? So the LDD, as I already mentioned, is the main department that is responsible for the rehabilitation or the land agricultural land improvement. So if you see this graph, So we can see that the land improvement increased rapidly in the last 40 or 50 years since 1997 up to now. Particularly the poor fertilizer, the yellow one, and the blue one, surface soil erosion. So soil erosion just other areas like the is quite the land improvement. This would take problem and almost 40 years for the marginal land. So based on the assumption that we still have the what you call the same amount of agriculture, no more further expansion. So it means one generation of humankind to improve all soil problem. So if we wait for 40 or 50 years, so I cannot imagine what are the serious or the condition in the future because the population is still increasing. So as Thailand become a member of the UNCCD, so recently the UNCCD proposed the new approach or the initiative for the for resolution of the land degradation. So they call the land degradation neutrality. This one is quite similar to the carbon neutrality. That's the amount of the carbon that have been emitted from the human activity will be similar amounts that we can capture in the ecosystem or the infrastructure. So this one is similar that the land degradation neutrality. So it means the percentage that we have create more problem to the land degradation. So we can have some measure or some effort to minimize or to improve the land degradation through the sustainable land management or the positive project, something like that. So there are lots of the restoration effort. For example, the GF put a lot of money and also aiming to rehabilitate about the 70 million hectares of the degraded land globally, and to achieve in 2030. And beside that, beside the national policy, so at the international levels, so there are some organizations working and to provide the policy recommendation to mitigate land degradation for biodiversity conservation, for example, the IPBES and the FAO. So in 2018, the IPBES already have one report on the land. Already show you in the previous neutrality is to protect, maintain, restore, and to enhance or to enable nature and to provide ecosystem service and to provide the food productivity to humankind. So based on the recommendation of the UNCCD for land degradation neutralities, so there are several factors to indicate the land degradation, but some indicator is very difficult to obtain the data or information. to analyze. So for Thailand, the Land Development Department recently performed the research and using 3 indicators to determine the land degradation neutralities. So one is the land use land cover change, and second one is the net primary productivity or NCC, and the other one is soil organic carbon stock. So based on these 3 indicators, for example, for the land use land cover change, so LDD would like to monitor the change in land degradation neutrality. So for the land use land cover change, so LDD already have the land use land cover map in 2009 and 2023. So this the classification, they have the 7 major, and based on this the percentage or the proportion of the land use land cover change, for example, the forest area to other area, or from intensive agriculture to extensive agriculture to intensive agriculture. And for the net productivity, so they use the MODIS, the satellite image. So MODIS has a few band, okay. In the remote sensing, we call the band. For example, the Lancet, they have there are 7 band. And for the MODIS, there are some wavelength amount of the image that we can define the national productivity or the NDVI. Okay, then they can compare the greenery area and the soil organic carbon stock. So the soil carbon stock, they use the survey data, because the LDD also have the nationwide inventory data. So they have the sample size. So, and for the sample size, they collect the soil carbon up to period. So based on the soil sample points across the country, so they can interpret or generate the map of the soil carbon in 2009 and 2023, and then they can superimpose or do the spatial analysis to determine the change of the soil carbon. So based on the spatial analysis of these 3 factors, then they can vertical crop with the protected area. So it means that within the protected area, right, the national park or wildlife sanctuary, so the change of either land use land cover change or the MPC and soil carbon will remain. But this assumption is not 100% accurate, because in protected area, the land use land cover change based on the human activity is still ongoing, but the decay is maybe less than outside protected area. So based on the this one, so that according to this 4 charts, so they have the 3 maps: land use land cover change, NPC, and SOC, and then they can calculate the overall LDN. So according to, and they classify the assessment by region. So in southern region, so about 3.5% classified as the degraded land, while the improved land or improved condition about 0.5%, and stable about 4.8, and the other one is no data or in the conservation area, protected area, right? In the northern area, so 6.5 area is classified as the degraded land, and 16.5% still stable, no change. So in northeast, 4.5, 18.5 stable, in improve about 3.8%, either by natural regeneration or human activities. Eastern area about 2% and 2% from the transfer, but the stable in the central area about 6.5. So at the national level, about 18.5% have been classified that they increased the soil degradation from 2009 to 2023, within the last 15 years. So that is a big problem. So this table shows the land degradation by land use type. For that land, 11.7 or 12%, cropland 5.3, and others. So it means that the expansion of agriculture is not large, about 5%, and the grassland is very low. While the forest land or the deforestation, either the clear cutting or the degraded, includes about 12%. And how about the land improvement? So for the land improvement, so if you see this one, so most of land improvement, about the total is 7%, but about 6% is located in agricultural land and grassland, while the forest plantation or rehabilitation is less than 1%. So this table on the left and on the right imply that the deforestation or the forest degradation is the main drivers to generate the land degradation. But the restoration of the degraded forest is very poor or very low percentage, one of 7%. Okay. So the UNCCD also proposed the land management practice to improve or to rehabilitate the degraded land, both in the forest land and cropland. So forest land, so they have the three main measures. One is restoration of the degraded forest in national forest area, and second is to develop or to promote economic forest plantation, and the last one is to create the greenery area in both urban and in the rural area. This one for recreation and for the nature, and in the cropland promote the sustainable agricultural practice. So reduce the use of the unsustainable land. So it means that the marginal agricultural land. So is it possible encourage the farmer to stop agriculture and change to the other practice like the agroforestry or use for other. Otherwise, the farmer invest a lot of money, but the economic return is very low if they go to the fertile land. And increase the proportion of land improvement by various practice. Okay. So come back to the forest landscape. So as you see this photo, I already mentioned previously. So in Southeast Asia, we have about 50% of the remaining forest cover, and protected area contribute about 15%, and the forest outside protected area about 35%. In Thailand, 73% is classified as a protected area, while about 14% are the forest outside or the fragmented forest and small patches in the landscape. And the forest area can classify in three categories. One is the intact national forest, and second is degraded forest that we need more what they call the improvement or restoration. And the other one is planted or the production forest. Okay. So the primary forest or the production forest. So most of them have been created at the protected area, right? National Park, Wildlife Sanctuary, or the community forest, 74%, and the rest are the community forest. And the degraded land or the degraded forest. So most of them are located outside protected area. In addition, we also have the planted forest or economic forest, either planted by native or the exotic species such as eucalyptus, acacia, or other species. However, the planted forest not only contribute to the increment of the forest cover, but also have the economic contribution to the local people, like the job employment or the carbon neutrality, or improve the environment. So I would like to start with the main mechanism for the land improvement in the forest area in the national forest. So what is the meaning of the ecological restoration? So ecological restoration is defined as the process of intentionally alerting a site to establish a defined indigenous or historical ecosystem. It means that we want to turn or to convert the degraded land back to the original state. For example, the restoration can do at the small size, like the size level within a short term, 5 years or 10 years. At the same time, we can do it at the landscape level or for the long-term objective. So this one we have to incorporate or consider other factors like the connectivities and complementary from one side to the other, and to provide the migration of the species, and to support the what you call the population of species to avoid inbreeding in small area. In other words, forest landscape restoration is defined as the ongoing and through the participatory process that to restore the ecological functionality, improve the human well-being in the deforested, or in the degraded forest landscape. So the picture on the right-hand side, so several conditions or several stages of the forest area. Either the intact forest, so we don't do anything for the intact forest, because most of them already what called under protection area. And we have the patches of the forest, either they degraded or have been converted to agriculture. So if those areas are located in the head watershed. So there will be a lot of measures have to be undertaken to improve the condition. So there are several techniques for forest landscape restoration, either assisted natural regeneration. I will tell you more about this one. And the second one, ecological restoration, reforestation or plantation, agroforestry, watershed rehabilitation, and restoration of the degraded land or land reclamation. Either use one single species that we call the monoculture, or use multi-species or mixed species that we call it as the diversification. So assisted natural regeneration, it means when we grow the native species, right? For the new species, for the plantation. So in the abundant or integrated area, there are lots of grasses, a lot of bush, or a lot of weeds. So in order to facilitate of the planted species to go faster and better performance, so we have to do some kind of the weeding or remove vegetation, allow the plantation to avoid the competition. So this native tree, either the one that we brought from nursery or from the stump, the spot, or from the copies, if we don't do any weeding or removal of the weed, so the growth will be slow and the competition is very high. So finally, the survival rate may be low. Okay. So second one is the enrichment planting or mixed restoration. So if you see this photo, so on the left, this is the monoculture. It means that we grow only one species in the systematic plantation, either in the spacing 2x2 or 4x4. This one according to the shape of the species. So the advantage of this one is quite easy for maintenance, and it is cost effective. But the disadvantage, so since we have one single species, so it's quite different from the natural structure and less species. But on the right hand side, this one will go the enrichment planting or the mixed species. So because a lot of species in the certain area and let the species compete each other through the natural selection. So finally, in the final state, the structure and the composition of the mixed species will be similar to the natural forest, but the cost is very high, maybe almost 10 times of the monoculture, and the maintenance is very difficult. Just let the natural selection occur. So this one mainly is applicable to the small size or for the experiment, but for the large scale plantation, particularly for the economic purpose. So we usually use the monoculture practice. So what is agroforestry? Agroforestry is the land use management system that associates with the tree species and agriculture practice, either agricultural crops or animals. So this kind of practice, so in previously we call the Tongya system. Tongya system is the system that occur promoted in Myanmar by the British professor during the colonization. So this one we associate agriculture and forestry at the same time, because the forestry activity is take a long time. Either, for example, the fast growing tree it take 5 to 6 years before harvesting, such as the eucalyptus or acacia. But for the teak plantation, it take longer than 20 years. So the farmer who are very poor, they cannot wait for 20 years to get the benefit. So they have to fill their stomach and to provide food and essential material for their family every day. But the agricultural practice is a short-term rotation, so they can harvest or gain the benefit every 1 month or 2 months, and they can wait until the long-term economic return, where they can cut the timber later on. So this one it means sometimes we call the win-win. So the farmer can gain short-term, medium-term, and long-term benefit. So how about the concept of the ecological restoration? So the aim of the eco-restoration is to re-establish the self-sustaining ecosystem and the sufficient resilience to repair the degraded forest that they have the lost productivity or lost the function. So if you see this map, so we have the two stages, right? One at the original ecosystem. This one before any degradation. So right now at the current stage, so the land have been converted for other use. So we don't have any remaining tree or whatever. But the aim, we want to go to the original ecosystem in order to achieve two objectives. For example, one is the ecosystem function, like the climate regulation and supporting formation, like the soil texture contents or the decomposition and the carbon stock and so on, biomass and nutrient. At the same time, this one we want to go to the ecosystem structure or composition. We have more native species and the abundance and the composition properly occur. So we have the mutual benefit to the level of the food chain. So there are three techniques. One we call the reallocation or the reclamation. So for the reclamation, so we can either obtain the benefit from ecosystem structure or from the biomass or ecosystem function. And the second one is the rehabilitation. Rehabilitation, this one is in the middle stage or is ongoing of restoration. So we cannot reach the ultimate goal of we cannot reach the final stage of the ecosystem yet. But for the restoration, this is full or complete restoration. So we have the similar function or similar ecosystem of the land after we put a lot of effort and do a lot of practice in order to go to the original ecosystem. So for the land reclamation, so normally this practice is popular when the land have been totally degraded. For example, the abundance my plantation. So all topsoil have been removed and no native species. So and the land is very dry. It cannot hold any water content. So if we introduce the native species, because the environmental already totally changed, so the native species usually are the shade abundant species. They cannot grow. So for the condition like this, so normally we introduce the pioneer species or the exotic species that they have the resistance to the drought or to the extreme environment. For example, acacia or eucalyptus. Uh, so after this fast-growing species can go up, so we have some bushes or some species that come and use in this area, and the land will be gradually changed to uh, the final state. For example, there is the one experiment in the Nakhon Ratchasima province. So that's the research station is funded by JICA or Japan. So originally they grow acacia and they don't do any removal or any harvesting after plantation. So it takes about 30 years before the native species invade that area and introduce species like acacia or exotic species die and have been repeated by the native species, and some animal already come and use the land. Okay. And second one is the rehabilitation. So rehabilitation, if you see the graph, this is the partial restoration. So it means that we can restore some function or some component of the original ecosystem. So normally we grow the native species, either the enrichment planting or assist natural regeneration. So this is the example that have been practiced in southern Thailand, in Indonesia, or in Malaysia, when we have the peace swamp that have been converted. So trees have been removed and used for agriculture. But fortunately, the soil structure and soil formation, we still have the topsoil, still have the peat at the top layer. So we can introduce the native species, and then the regeneration start evolving from time to time. Okay. And the last one is the restoration. Restoration is full restoration. It means we replicate the structure, function, and diversity of the ecosystem. So normally we use the mixed native species. So we have the example from the project in Chiang Mai. We call the forest or the rehabilitation system. So they grow a lot of species, and then they don't remove any tree or do any silviculture practice, and it took about 20 or 30 years. So to have the condition like this one, so we have the mixed species and a lot of wildlife and animal come and inhabit in this area. But I already told you that this one can be done in the small scale, small patches. because the investment costs are very high. So beside the theoretical system, so for the practice, the IPCC. So IPCC is the intergovernmental organization that promote the mitigation of the climate change. So about 20 years ago, so they promote the mechanism. It's called the reducing emission from deforestation and forest degradation. So you want to promote the forest plantation and to absorb the carbon through the photosynthesis. So this is the effort to create the financial value and for carbon store in the forest. So it means if anyone or any organization grows the trees and can capture carbon, so we can use that the credit from the carbon restoration in the ecosystem and to get money from the development or from the investor. So the mechanism for the rate or RED have been evolved from time to time. So the first one, they aim to reduce the carbon. So now the biodiversity have been integrated. So it's called the rate REDD activity rate part, or to promote the green economy or the BCG approach, and also to maintain the ecosystem services. So the original idea was proposed in 2008. So up to now is almost 18 years or nearly 20 years. So you can see the erosion. So the first one is the lead reduction of emission from deforestation in forest. This one only to promote reforestation and plantation. And second one, less plus. So they indicate the conservation of forest and to enhance the carbon sink. So it means that the reforestation must be the land that have not been converted to agriculture in the last 10 years. So it means that the abundant land, right? So we can convert and keep it more than 10 years for the carbon sink. But right now, they have the less plus. So they're not only carbon, but biodiversity and ecosystem services are included in this mechanism. So this is the Taiwan rate. So if we have the degraded area and deforestation and degradation, so if we go the forest, so this one is the reduction. So we can restore the forest. So try to think the enhancement. So from the degraded land, right? Degraded land, we can go the tree. So the carbon will be absorbed in the natural ecosystem. And Thai Sea also include the biodiversity. So it means that not only to put a tree, but also to consider other ecological functions. For example, use the native species and consider the structure of the ecosystem. So wildlife, that bird and mammal can utilize this area. So beside the rest, so right now there is the other mechanism promoted by a European country. It's called the EUDR, European Deforestation uh, uh, regulation. It means that on agricultural product, 16 product such as the forest, soybean, or others, this must be produced or generated from the area, not from the deforestation area, right? This one is come to enforce. I think last November. So it prohibits all relevant commodity or agricultural product, including the forest production, like agriculture, oil palm, rubber, or wood, or the processed product. That if any countries would like to export to EU, so they have to prove with the evidence that the products are not come from the deforestation area, and they have through the legal supply chain from the source, from the raw material through the supply chain or chain of custody until to the final product, and free of the human rights abuse. So no, what you call, you cannot use the child labor or use your labor more than 10 hours per day, something like that. And covered by to the regent statement. So it means that you have the paper, and to prove, then the buyer can trace back to the origins of your product. So in Indonesia and in Vietnam, I think the process and the implementation are quite as one. So they have the computerized system to monitor on product from the origin or from the raw material until the final product. They either use the barcode or the chip or what any techniques. So in Thailand, I think for agricultural product, I think right now we are quite successful only for the rubber, either rubber latex or the uh, rubber wood. So on supply chain we can follow. So this one we can prove the geolocation of the rubber plantation, not in the degraded forest or in the protected area. So the owner have to prove the land title or the sustainable use and on process, and not only the human rights, but for the rights, uh, pesticide and chemicides must be free. But for forestry, for forest activity, we don't have this system yet. Okay. So let's take break for 50 minutes. Then we will continue at 2:45. เจนพักก่อนนะ15 นาที
การค่ะ
กลับมาแล้วนะ Okay. So let's continue. So before the break, I stop at the EUDR regulation, the sharing and opportunities. So even though EUDR become the sharing for the agriculture and forestry management, but it will become the opportunities for the we call the legal process or the legal supply chain of the land use and agriculture and forestry activities. So besides the landscape restoration, so what are the other principles and guidelines that we can promote the landscape restoration into biodiversity conservation? So this guideline was published several years ago. So it includes the spatial principles and community principle. So for the spatial principle, so I already shows some figure related to this one previously when I discussed about the protected area system. So for landscape restoration, if we have large area, so that can sustain more species than small species population, and sometimes many small patches is much better than one large patch in one certain area to avoid the uncertainty from the disaster or for the forest fire. And the shape of the restoration. So if you see this shape, so the round shape or regular shape is much better than what you call the long or the narrow shape that doesn't have the core area. Okay. Another one for the isolated patch. If we can make it more connected and close together, so this one will provide the what we call the connectivity or the migration of the species from one area to the other area. So if the migration path along the two intact patch are degraded, so we can do the rehabilitation to first stage the healthy and the migration route of the species, and the heterogeneous mosaic landscape or the mixed plantation is much better than the mono plantation because it can support the multi-species rather than the single species. So what are the community principles? So we have the full restoration. So that's comprise a lot of the native species that we will obtain both structure, composition, and function is much better, and increase the structural diversity. So it means that when we do the landscape restoration in the natural forest or the degraded forest, not aiming for the economic production. So if we use the multi-layer, like the figure on the left-hand side, is much better than the figure on the right-hand side when we have only one layer, one crown layer. So this one will provide what we call the multi-eco-richness to birds, animal, and to waterbed. Okay. So the mixed community or large area, so we can support a large of the population to avoid the inbreeding and low intensity of the management. For example, in the forest area, if we do the selection cutting, is much better than the clear cutting or the patches harvesting is also better than the total area harvesting. So these are the main principles. So after that book was published, the C4 is the something like the technical institution based in Australia. So they apply these techniques of the landscape restoration in three category of the forest landscape. One is the natural forest or the locked over forest. It means it's already in the past concession area. And the other one is the forest plantation. And the last one is degraded forest. So for forest plantation and lock over, so we have some degree of the forest harvesting. So as I already mentioned, for the natural forest, so normally the selective cutting or the thinning is promoted, while the forest plantation or the monoculture practice, the clear cutting is very common. So when we do the select cutting, so we can open the gap of the forest, so we can have some kind of the regeneration from the seedling, either from the nearby mother trees, or if we don't have piece or the seedling of the mother tree, so we can do some kind of the enrichment planting. So this one can accelerate it natural regeneration, and we have to remove some weed or some species that not targeted and do the enrichment planting for the no seedling. So if we follow this one, we can improve the forest ecosystem through the rehabilitation process. But on the other hand, for the rehabilitation in the forest plantation and decrease the forest, that we do the clear cutting. So it means that we don't have the mother trees or no seedlings banked in the target area. So we have to bring the seedling from outside, from the nursery, and do some kind of the plantation. So after we plant 4 or 5 years, when crowd cover come close together, we have to do some kind of the silviculture practice, the thinning or pruning, in order to improve the productivity and the growth performance. And there are several recommendations or guidelines to promote the forest plantation in order to incorporate the biodiversity practice. So the benefits of the forest landscape plantation in general. So we can have the benefit to the environment or ecological protection. For example, the carbon mitigation, biodiversity conservation, soil and water management, disaster risk reduction, and for the socio-economic or the livelihood. So it means that the local people can get involved at the labor or work with the company or from the government, so they can gain some money. And at the same time, sometimes they are allowed to intercrop between the plantation in the first 3 or 4 years, so they can gain a short-term benefit. And for the governance, so the forest plantation can solve the conflict or resolution. Sometimes we cannot relocate people to outside. So the Tongya system or agroforestry practice. So these are the techniques that we can mitigate the conflict and include the social or the needs of the local people. So this one will become something like we call the harmony between conservation and development. So if you see the picture on the right hand side, is the integrated sustainable forest management or the landscape restoration. So we can have three dimensions of the object or the benefit, either nature for nature. So this one, if we do the landscape restoration, nature for nature, this one can be done in the protected area, where the land do not belong to the local people or no people living inside. And on this one, it nature for cultures. So if we have the indigenous people or the local people living in this area for several generations, and they coexist with the nature. They have some belief and spiritual practice. So this kind of the what you call the objective is promoted. And the other one for society is mean that this one is oriented to the economic development, and the people can gain more benefit. So the proportion of the social benefit is much more than the nature by nature. Okay. So these are some concept idea of the corridor, as I already mentioned. So I would like to skip this one. Okay. So for the economic forest, so we already finished the natural and degraded forest. Now we go to the economic forest. So economic forest is also important because large percentage of the remaining forest is contributed to the economic forest, not the protected area. And that area also important for the habitat of many species and for the livelihood of the local people. So this article on the right hand side showing in Borneo, orangutan. So even though some of orangutan living in a protected area, but according to the long-term monitoring and the research, so they found that 80% of the Borneo orangutan living outside protected area. So the management of the economic forest or forest outside protected area have to coexist or align with the biodiversity conservation. Because the objective only biodiversity conservation only 30%, but the other have more percentage or more contribution. Okay. So now come to Thailand. So Thailand, even though we have the 32% of the remaining forest cover, about 24% have been designated as a protected area. So we have the economic forest right now about 7.8% as under responsible of the Royal Forest Department. But the Royal Forest Department have the long-term objective to increase economic forest to 15% in the future. This is under the national forest policy. But if you see the graph above, this is the wood demand in Thailand from year 2005 to 2040. You can see that the amount of the wood demand would increase almost 100% from 66 million cubic meter to 128 million cubic meter. But however, the forest logging concession in Thailand have been completely stopped in 1989, as I already mentioned. But the economic forest that have been undertaken either by forestry industry organization or the private company cover only 1.3% and can supply limited amount of the wood for utilization. So according to the recent report of the FAO, so FAO predicted in the future about 50% of the global wood production will come from the plantation. So similar to Thailand, in order to reduce dependency of the imported wood from overseas, from Scandinavia or other, or to use the substitute material for construction. So the government of Thailand is aiming to increase the economic forest from now, increase about 8.5% more in the near future, in the next 20 years. So this this amount is different from the rubber plantation that we already have the 6%. So if the forest department and the private sector can jointly increase the forest cover about 8%, so it means that we can reach the 15% of the economic forest, can meet the future wood demand in Thailand and reduce the dependency of the imported wood products from overseas. So currently, the International Tropical Timber Organization, or ITTO, that promote the sustainable forest management, they are working with the IUCN to update the previous guideline of forest landscape restoration to include the conservation of the biodiversity according to the Convention on Biodiversity and the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Target. So there are 11 principles and more than 30 guidelines. For example, they have the principle for land use and spatial planning forest at the landscape levels and manage the production forest at the landscape. And principle 9 and 10 is very important and are highly related to our class today. Is the biodiversity conservation, both at the forest management unit, how to do harvesting and thinning and plantation, and also the biodiversity conservation in the planted or the large scale or at the landscape plantation. So right now there are a lot of the initiative and movement to promote the wood sustainable wood consumption beside the substitution. So this is the example in Finland from Scandinavia. So Finland used to have, I think, less than 30% of the forest cover. So during the time, most of the Finnish population, they use the either metals or other material for the construction. So different you can see the simplify of the building. So it means that the carbon storage in the construction is very low. At the same time, the demand for the wood also low because the people have the long perception to use the substitute material. So the forest cover is very high. But since the government promote the wooden city to use the wood from sustainable forest management and from the recovered sources. So this one can promote or can persuade the people to grow more tree in the ecosystem. So it means that the carbon can be kept in the forest much higher than the previous time. And they promote the wooden city or use wood in the construction or in the building and can generate more than 10% of the GDP only from the wood. So this one is the main mechanism to rapidly, substantially increased forest cover from 25% in the last century to 75%. And the ITTO also have the similar is the approach and to promote member country. So if you see on the right hand side about the carbon emission from the material, so if we have wood or the bamboo, so it means that we can keep or the emission will be negative. It means that we can keep the carbon in the ecosystem. And if we use the other material like the steel, PVC, or aluminum, it means that we generate a lot of the carbon to the atmosphere. And consequently, if we have the climate change impact and biodiversity loss and land degradation. So this one we can see a lot of the typical house in Japan. Japan also have the similar projects. So Japan have the laws. Previously, they enforced that on government building must use the wood for construction at least 8%. So right now they increased to 13% in the government building. And the private company Sumitomo, they will use the what called the innovative technology to increase the strength of the wood durability, and they are aiming to build 40 floors of the big building in Tokyo, and this project will be completed in 2040. And this is the other building in the Sweden. So all material are made from wood. So while the plantation can absorb the carbon. So if I recall, when you were young, study at the primary or the secondary school, so we study the photosynthesis, that the plant can use water and carbon dioxide and transform this to what's called to the substitute to the carbohydrate, and they have the and release the water and oxygen. So it means that the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere will be kept into the tree to the photosynthesis. But not only the carbon will be kept in the forest ecosystem in the tree, either above ground or below ground. But when we have the tree respiration and the standing tree, so during the respiration or the photosynthesis, a lot of carbon also will be kept in the soil. And even the tree have been lost and harvested for utilization, a lot of carbon will be kept in the wood product, like the kitchen table or chair. So we will have the less amount or less proportion of the carbon will be emitted to the atmosphere. So this is the literature showing the amount of the different type of forest, evergreen, big deciduous, pine, and mangrove. So how much carbon will be kept above ground, below ground, and total carbon storage per ton and per ride. So about 6.25 rides is equal to 1 hectare. And for the forest plantation, for example, for the teak, 20 to 30 years. So 1 hectare can keep the carbon about 40 to 60 ton per hectare. It's very large. So luckily, Thailand recently Thailand we have the new nationally determine the carbon emission carbon reduction policy in the next 10 years. So previously, Thailand government uh, put a lot of effort and spent a lot of money for energy, transportation, waste, agriculture, and also the polluted substance. But recently, they have the land use, land cover, or promote the forest plantation for the carbon emission. So by doing this, we can absorb or to reduce, I think about 47% of the carbon emission from the baseline from 2019. So if you see this graph carefully, so you can see that only land use and land cover practice is only measure that can mitigate the carbon emission, while the other sectors, so it's very costly, and the results or the efficiency is much lower than the carbon land use and land covers. So based on the funding support from international from the ITTO, so I was involved in this project. So right now we have the project to promote the sustainable wood use and work with the private sector and local community. So we already signed the MOU among the more than 300 company, particularly it's a big company like the SDG, SCG, and other that we want to promote the wood use in the society and to reduce the consumption of the substitutional material. Okay. So this is the real example that happened in different places. For example, in Cambodia, so this area used to be the severe degraded reserve forest, no tree at all. The ground is very dry. The situation is similar to desertification. So we have the Israel company. So Israel company rent the degraded forest from the forest department of Cambodia for 50 years, and to promote the teak plantation is about 4 years old. So the land from the degraded land or the dry land. So now it's become the what you call the more fertile and covered by tree and more carbon storage and high NPP, right? So not only the contribution to environment or to the natures, so the company also hire the local people to get involved or to work with the company for the plantation. And the company also develop a lot of infrastructure, road network, irrigation, and electricity. And in the other example in Panama, and this area used to be abandoned U.S. military camp, so similar to the degraded forest in Cambodia, and also the range also 50 years. So they grow teak also. This one is about 5 to 6 year olds, but they also employ the what they call the landscape restoration practice for biodiversity. So the areas along the canals or the creeks, they don't grow any tree, but let the natural regeneration happen. And after 4 or 5 years, they install a camera trap to monitor whether any wildlife or animal use this the corridor. So based on the photo capture from the camera trap, so they found that there are some animals like the reptile, the or several birds use this wildlife corridor to movement from the forest patch in the other part to the other and using this corridor. And this is the other example of the private tea plantation in Nan province. So the area used to belong to the local people, poor local people. So after that, the local people sold this land to the company for the tea plantation. So they go spacing 4 by 7. So before the trees go and the crowd cover close together. So the first 3 years, they allow the local people who have been engaged at the labor in the tea plantation to intercrop like the pumpkin, rice, or the cassava. So the farmer can gain the benefit without the payment, anything. But at the same time, the company can save the labor cost from weeding forest fire plantation and the fertilizer that the farmer apply for their plantation or excess fertilizer input. So the trees nearby also gain the benefit. So based on the observation from the company, so they found that the tree that they allow the intercropping is go much faster than the area that no intercropping because of the fertilizer applied or the maintenance of the weeding or the soil clouding from the farmer. So the last topic about the nature-based resolution. So in fact, the nature-based resolution approach have been promoted by IUCN several years ago. So the nature-based resolution are the action to protect, sustainably manage, and restore the natural or modified ecosystem to directly address the society challenge in an effective and adaptive manner while ensuring the human well-being and producing benefit of biodiversity. So if we compare the forest landscape restoration principle and the nature-based resolution is quite similar because we want to manage and restore natural or modified ecosystem. But the nature-based resolution also includes the socio-economic component and the human well-being in the practice. So the nature-based resolution or NBSAP right now is become a popular mechanism for several countries for the economic development. For example, in Thailand, we use it for long-term greenhouse gas emission development strategy. So nature-based resolution have the 6 criteria. One is societal sharing. So it means that the practice have to provide benefit to local people and the design at scale. So the scale of the plantation for the implementation, it will be different from project by project. So one project is maybe small and the other project will be larger. And the third criteria is you contribute to biodiversity, so more positive and economic feasibility. It means not only biodiversity, but also provide economic and inclusive government. It means it promote the participatory management and will balance the trade-off not only to biodiversity or to economic and to social, but it have to capture key component and nature, social and culture. And usually the forest activities are the main component of the nature-based resolution. So at the global scale, I use in the meta-analysis and found that if we use the nature-based resolution, so the cost of implementation of the nature-based resolution will be 30% compared to the various sectors at energy, waste, and so on and so forth. And this one can stabilize the urban warming to 2%. So if you still remember this graph, right? So the government used to put a lot of money for energy, transportation, waste, and other. But right now they turn to land use, land cover. So based on the analysis of the recent one, so the nature-based resolution will cost only 30% of the other, but have very, what you call the effective result from the implementation. And the other reports that have been done by the UNEP. So each year, governments from various countries spend about 3 trillion US dollar to tackle the nature negative impacts or any disaster or the impact from the what you call the degradation of nature, such as flooding, droughts, climate change, or others. But the money, okay, and the public side, and from 7 trillion US dollar, the government paid about 1.7 trillion, but the projects that are related to the nature-based resolution only 11%, but the other contribute to other sector. And for Thailand, so Thailand, the government contribute less than 0.5% of the global nature-based resolution. That's amount to 200 billion US dollar. For the government of Thailand, less than 0.5%. But the benefits that we can obtain for nature-based resolution, not only to nature, but also to the society. For example, to reduce natural hazards, socio-economic development, food security, water and energy supply, health, and the climate change, and so on and so forth. For example, this one, forest isn't the tree and wildlife, but it provides multiple benefits to the ecosystem service. For example, the rainfall regulation, carbon storage, and biodiversity, and to the people and fresh water. So this is a few examples of the nature-based resolution that have been implemented with the support from various organizations. For example, in Chiang Rai province, so they have the wetland in the in Nong Bong Khai, in Chiang Rai. This is an important wetland. So they have the wetland management, because the wetland can protect several trees and flora and fauna species and numbers of mammal that are listed of the endangered species by IUCN and reptile. At the same time, this project also contribute to the society or to the government. For example, to the food and raw material and empower local people to work together, right? The civic society or the government, so they can get involved in the natural resource management and share the what's called the discussion or the decision. And the other example in Krabi province in southern Thailand along the Andaman Sea. So they have the project in the mangrove forest, work with the local people and the use for the coastal zone management and the ecosystem base. This at the risk production and the restoration of the mangrove forest through various mechanisms. For example, the EUDRR, the community-based mangrove forest management and ecosystem-based action. So based on beside this project, so the researcher in Thailand also summarize or do the literature about the contribution of the rehabilitated mangrove forest and sea grasses. So how much this two vegetation type can contribute to the carbon flux, methane storage, and carbon sequestration. So it show clearly that is a lot of the what's called the big contribution from this country. So even though this information usually is not available in many countries, but Thailand we have the good data, especially for the mangrove, but the methane storage is still lacking. So we need more research and more conductivity. So for the rehabilitation, so if we have the three scenario or three options, so if we do more, as I already mentioned, right, the nature based, we have to do both nature for nature, nature for culture, and nature for socio-economic. So this one, if we do more conservation, so it means that we want to designate of the mangrove forest for protected area or conservation and do less restoration. And option two, so this one is something like the both the conservation and restoration. And the last one, restoration, where we have the degraded forest, most of them already degraded. So we do a lot of the restoration. What is the contribution of the landscape or the forest restoration to the nature-based resolution? So this one showing that, okay, if we have more conservation and less restoration, okay, so conservation we have quite high, but restoration we have very low, and conservation offsets is quite high for the mangrove and for others. But if we have this quite balanced for the second option, so the second option it show I think what's called very high amount for the contribution to the carbon emission through various options. So this one conservation and restoration should work hand in hand, not only taking only one side, either conservation or restoration. Okay. And the last example, this one for the simulation for modeling. So we have nature for nature, nature for culture, and nature for society. So I have the project in Nan province for the land use, land cover change, and how to manage the forest and land use landscape in Nan province. So this one show the agriculture practice and non-agriculture and so on and so forth. So we have three land use scenario. One is the business as usual. So it means the forest cover will decline from 62% to 47%. But if we have the integrated or the market-oriented scenario, so we will have for landfill loss from 62 to 57%. But if we have the conservation, so we put more effort for conservation forest, we can keep forest cover to 67% in the future. And this graph show the proportion of each land use scenario. So after I did the provincial land use scenario, we have the size level practice at the small watershed in Vieng Sa district, which comprise of three small catchments, the forest and the mass plantation and others. So the total area is about less 12 the square kilometer. So this one we have the land use practice right now and in the future. If you have the trend scenario and if you have the integrated and the future climate change also incorporate. For example, so existing land use right now the forest cover 54% and mass and corn 43, rubber 1%. For the trend scenario, forest cover will decline about 17%, and we have more mass production. But if we have the integrated scenario, so we can increase forest cover to 40%, and the mass will reduce about 17%, and rubber plantation increase to 7%. So what are the consequences of this land use practice in the future? So this one is shows very clear. Okay, this one is the right now. So the climate change will play more roles in land use land cover. But if we have the integrated land use, so we can maintain the flows of the water at least 2 more months because we have the clouds cover. And for the sedimentation, so the integrated forest or conservation forest, we can substantially reduce the amount of the sedimentation and the soil erosion. But not only the nature or the water and the sediment. In this research, we also incorporate economic component. So with type of land use that provide the highest economic return. And the results show that the scenario three is the integrated land use practice. So not only forest conservation, but also the rubber plantation can generate the highest economic return, either without climate change or with climate change in the future. Okay, and this one can approve. We also do the what called the limiting factors. For example, the limiting factor of the water use and how much the people will spend money for the dredging of the soil erosion. And based on overall analysis by integrate the the nature biodiversity, and also the economic land use, soil erosion, and the water. So we conclude that the integrated management is the what's called the optimum or the most suitable land use practice in this study area. And there are some more examples in other countries, like in Switzerland for the whole country. So they also do similar this one. And in the entire European country, they also nature for nature, nature for culture, and nature for society. And finally, they come up with kind of the land use practice is suitable. So in conclusion, forest landscape and biodiversity. So forest constitutes very critical and very important. So we have to do a lot of the ecosystem restoration because the native forests have been degraded, and the intact forest should be allocated at the conservation area. So if we follow this one strictly, so we can stop the loss of the forest extinction, mitigate the climate change, and the local peoples and the society. It means that we can maintain the biodiversity in the long run. And for the economic forest and degraded forest, so the sustainable forest management is very important because it can contribute to many benefits, not only biodiversity, but also other sector. Okay, so that's all my presentation. So in finals, so if you see this the feedback loop again that I show you for the last week presentation. So we used to have the forest cover, how to increase the forest cover and to reduce the encroachment or the deforestation. So right now we have a lot of the international intervention, either from the CBD, MBSEP, OECM, international policy, and we can change the perception of the local people, use less the substitute material, and use more wood. So if we use more wood for construction, so we can encourage more plantation, then the carbon can be kept both in the natural ecosystem and in the construction. And the nature-based resolution is the suitable or the promising measure to promote the sustainable forest management either at the management unit site or the landscape level. So in final, so sustainable forest management is not the forest maintenance. It is a nature-based resolution that tackle the climate change, biodiversity loss, and land degradation, and advancing or to promote the implementation of the UN SDG. So the forest are growing role in the ecosystem and stewardship being both the challenge and for the opportunity. For example, the EUDR and several the international intervention. And previously, when we saw this problem, by the fragmented response. So we need the integrated or the holistic approach. Otherwise, we can solve one issue but create the other problem. So the nexus approach and holistic strategy are very important, essential to sustain the management of the forest and to enhance the resilience, not only the people, but also the nature to the several driver, direct and indirect driver. So any question from the audience? I already share my PowerPoint with Professor Yutunapong, so he can share with you. So if you have more question, you can send your question to Dr. Yutunapong and he will share with me. Okay. So if no question, I would like to end my lecture today. Thank you very much for your attention.